Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be setting up a dry gouache palette using the Turner Designer Gouache. Now I don't think I've seen any other art YouTubers, like any of the ones that I follow. I don't think I've seen anyone talk about the Turner Design Gouache. It seems to be a gouache that's not very prevalent in stores. I've only been able to find this at Jerry's Artorama and Jerry's Wholesale Club. Now this gouache is definitely not my favorite to use. I've only used it twice before, I think, and it just comes out pretty chalky even when it's directly out of the tube. But just going to make a palette using this. I already have 4 colors already pre-poured. I was going to use this palette the last time I was in Japan, and I was just testing it out, trying to use those 4 colors, and I didn't have a white, so I didn't get to really paint anything. So for this time I'm just going to try and have all the colors I would need in case if I do want to use this the next time I'm out traveling. And I'm going to make this a dry gouache palette just because I don't want to deal with mold. I know I can get like a wet palette and that's probably better. I would put Holbein in that, but I just don't want to deal with the mold issue since I don't paint outdoors that often. But this is what the palette is. It's a Winsor & Newton Cotman set that I got a long time ago. I think they're still in Michael's if you want this exact style. I don't like it too much just because it doesn't lay flat, so I would have to hold it in my hand the entire time, and that's fine because usually when I'm traveling I wouldn't have a place to like actually sit down, so I would just be holding it in my hand and holding the sketchbook like on my knee or trying to hold everything together. So that's fine. I do like that it comes with that one piece that pulls out, and so you can have like 2 palettes at the same time. That's very helpful. But I'm making a dry palette with this just to use up the gouache. It was actually really expensive and I don't want it to just go to waste sitting in one of my drawers. I think one of the bigger sets that I got was around $50, and I think that was for 18 colors, and so it was very expensive. That's about the same amount I pay for Holbein gouache, which is significantly better personally for me to work with. So I definitely don't recommend searching for this gouache if you want something like Himi gouache feels better than this, honestly. So I know I'm just ragging on this gouache over and over again, but honestly, based on the 4 colors that I already have pre-poured, they seem to re-wet fine after they're dried out, and like when I had them in Japan, yeah, they crack and they crumble, but it wasn't making a huge mess. And so I'm just going to go ahead and make a entire palette using these colors that I have here. I'll also list them on the screen, but first off I wanted to just do a little swatch card to see how they look just straight out of the tube, and then with some white. And obviously another thing I don't like, a lot of them have the binders separating from the pigment, and so it just looks like this over and over again, which is a shame because sometimes you'll get like super liquidy and very not opaque just because of all the binder being separated. And then other times, like the white, it's super sticky. So I don't know what's going on with this gouache. I know that's normal with some gouaches being like super sticky. I just personally haven't experienced it with any other good brands that I've used, and so it's just very different for me. But you can see from the swatches I'm doing, once you get the pigment and the binder mixed together again, and I've just been doing that by shaking the tube and just massaging it before I try to pour out some paint. Once you do that, it makes some really nice pastels when you add the white, and even straight out of the tube, it's not overbearing to me. I usually hate using straight out of the tube. Just because it's too vibrant for the type of work I used to do, but I mean, I guess it's fine for the work I do now. But yeah, it just looks really nice with pastels. And it honestly, it goes down pretty easily on the paper. I know it can be a little hard layering, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, this is how the palette looks like after I've tested everything. Those are the colors, and you can see still a lot of them had binder separation, and that's even after I massaged the tube and shook it around. It's just a thing that happens with this gouache. I also did 2 more swatches of different blues. I was just trying to figure out which ones I wanted. It's sky blue and turquoise blue in that order, and I realized I didn't like either of them, so I'm just gonna keep with the ones I originally swatched out. And you can see here that it can be pretty difficult to get the gouache out. It can be super runny, and then you can get the super clumpy, sticky parts. I know those are great technical terms for the gouache, but it's just very inconsistent in the consistency. But one of my favorite things to do when I'm watching other art YouTubers is watch them mix their colors and make specifically watercolor palettes. And so I thought I would give you a little bit of that here. So if that's your thing as well, please enjoy the next few minutes as I pour all these paints. And I know I have these 4 pans already filled with gouache previously. I'm just going to add some fresh gouache on top just to try and make it all the same level. And I'm also just using the back of a paintbrush to mix the gouache together. I'm just trying to get rid of as many air bubbles as I can, just so that it helps reduce cracking, and it seemed to work on most of the gouache. Others obviously had a lot more cracking, and that's probably due to a little bit too much binder versus pigment. So one of the worst ones is the Havana Red, which is the very first red that you see there. That one had the most amount of cracking after everything dried. And I made a mistake with this one. This is the cobalt blue, and I already had this already mixed in that other pan that was dry, and so I did all the work making this look pretty, and this one was pretty sticky too, but I did all the work making this one look pretty and then realized I have to take all of this gouache out. But I didn't want to waste it, so I just slapped it right on top of the other. It is a lot in there, but it's okay. And so now I'm actually putting in the correct color, which is Prussian blue here. And there's a cat outside our house that likes to freak Mochi out. He comes by like every day and just terrorizes her basically because she can't get to him. I also noticed that the less amount of gouache I poured in each pan, the more it cracked after drying. And like even having those 4 pans that were already dry, if I just added a little bit more gouache to them, they didn't really crack that much afterwards. So I think loading your pan with a lot of gouache, if you're trying to do a dry palette, is a good idea instead of just doing smaller wells or not filling the well completely. I think that will help with reducing cracking. Another thing I really like about this Cotman set is the little clips that you put the wells in. You can take them out and it makes it so much easier to just replace the colors and keep everything from like jumbling around. One downside is I bought these wells off of Amazon, or the half pans off of Amazon, and they're not the right size for a Cotman set. And so like they fit, but they wiggle around and they don't like clip in the best. So I haven't had like any of the actual pans fall out before, but it just makes them a little bit more loose and honestly it makes them easier to pull out, so I'm not too against it. And you can see that I'm trying to use a palette knife to shove them a little bit further down. I just didn't want to make a mess with everything. And they clip in pretty easily back into the palette. and I just ordered everything, putting the reds and yellows on top and then the greens and blues on the bottom. But this is how the palette looks after everything is poured in, and I thought I might as well just do a quick painting just to see how the colors work. And again, my previous experiences with this gouache have not been great. The very first time I used it, I was having such a hard time getting the layering to work correctly, and then the second time it was just getting very muddy. So I wanted to just do a quick sketch, just do a quick painting, and see if I was able to use them just to make something. And so I'm doing a sketch of just a little train that I have a reference photo of, and I just used the reference photo to get the positioning of the train, and then I just added like a little bit more elements just as background. So I'm not doing a limited color palette on this one, which is not very normal for me. I'm actually pulling from every single pan in this palette just to see how everything works together. And I found right off the bat, it just feels so much different than the other gouache I'm used to. It felt like I had to push the paint along the paper instead of it just gliding easily, and adding more water just kind of diluted everything and made it less opaque, and so I couldn't really do that either. I don't really have a method when it comes to doing gouache paintings. I tend to just throw whatever colors down I want to immediately. I don't try to like tackle it by doing like specific colors first. I typically try to do darkest first. That's just something that I learned with oil painting. Always do dark to light, but I just do whatever feels right to me with gouache. But I'm going to shut up for a little bit. If you'd like to just sit back and watch, go ahead. If you'd like to just go ahead and paint with me for the next 10 minutes, that's fine too. I'll come back in a little bit. And I'm just wrapping up on this painting, adding the final details to it. Honestly, it seemed to layer pretty well after like all my complaints about it previously. I think some colors just have trouble layering on top of others, and it may just be the type of pigment they're using. I honestly don't know because I usually don't have trouble with pinks layering on top of other colors when it comes to Holbein or any other gouache, like even Himi gouache. I don't have that issue, but with this one I do. And so I guess some colors that are more translucent I can't use on top of darker colors with this specific gouache. But right now I'm just taking it off of the watercolor block that I have. I actually really like how this one turned out. I definitely need to use my watercolor blocks more often. I really don't like it when my paper warps, and I never stretch my watercolor paper just because I'm using gouache and I never knew how to stretch paper correctly. But I really like how this turned out. I like using this specific paper. This was done using the fluid watercolor block in cold press, and it was 300 GSM. And I like to do a swatch on the back of all my paintings just so that I know what colors I used, and just as a refresher in case if I ever want to look back on this painting and just be like, okay, how did I get these two colors? I can always look back here and see what I used. And after painting this little study, honestly, the colors seem to work fine. Again, I still feel like it's not my favorite gouache to use. I just want to use it all up so it's not going to waste in my drawer, because I did spend a lot of money on this gouache and I kind of wish I hadn't gotten it, but I just want to use it up and be done with it. But this is what the painting looks like. There's a little bit of shimmer to it. I think that's just how the darker colors ended up drying. And I just wanted to do a comparison against my very first painting I did using this gouache. This is another train painting, and you can see I had a lot of trouble getting some layering, especially with those trees, and it felt very thin. Compared to this one, I think it's just based on the level of practice. Just consistently using the same gouache over and over again, you'll get a little bit better. This is a comparison with my Turner acrylic gouache now. I honestly prefer the acrylic gouache versus the designer gouache from Turner. Everything's just a lot more opaque and easier with coverage. The design gouache still had some trouble. Now this I wanted to throw in too. This one is my favorite painting out of these couple. This is actually done with Himi jelly gouache. And so I'm just trying to show that it doesn't matter how expensive some of your gouache is, you can get really good results with the cheaper ones. And some of my favorite paintings I have are done with Himi. But again, that is the gouache palette I made. I'm gonna let it sit and dry, and I plan to use it on my next trip. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!